a master's degree in forestry from the University of the Philippines. He then acquired his PhD in watershed management from the University of Arizona. His field of expertise includes forestry and watershed management, and he is a member of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the 2007 co-winner of the Nobel Peace Prize.
Our next expert is Dr. Carlos Primo David. He holds a bachelor and a master degree in geology from the University of the Philippines. He then acquired his PhD in environmental science and geology from Stanford University in 2003. He has experience on climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction, while his field of expertise includes earth science, hydrology, and sustainable water resource management. He is currently an associate professor in the National Institute of Geological Science at the University of
vulnerable, and therefore there is such a rationale for some funding that should go to countries that are vulnerable like the Philippines.
Ayan. Thank you, Rodela. See how easy it is for me? The Green Climate Fund is intended to help developing countries adapt to these changes. Kaya kami nag-aaway internationally, the Philippines is the co-chair of the Green Climate Fund. They created the mechanism pero wala pa talagang pera. So yun ang laging pinag-aawayan natin ngayon na kailan kaya makikita yung suporta dahil the scientists, the mainstream scientists already declared na mukhang kailangan na mag-adapt lalo na mahihirap na bansa tulad ng Pilipinas. I hope we answered that question.
All right. Thanks, ma'am. And thank you to our experts. Now, so our first question came from the Adamson University. Now, for our next question.
Yung matatapang, ayun.
All right, from the University of the Philippines.
Good morning. I'm Rage Gonzalez from UP Diliman. Anyone could answer? I just like to know is nuclear power plant a good source? Can we say that it's a clean source of energy? And is it possible to any parts of the Philippines to be put up?
Well, nuclear energy is clean, at least on the greenhouse gas. Walang masyadong emission. But the issue of nuclear is safety. So they thought before, if we are a country that is prone to earthquakes, you see what happened to Fukushima, Japan na ngayon, ganun na nangyari. Imagine if that will happen to our country. So I guess that's, in terms, let's say, on climate change and greenhouse gas emission, tama ba? Wala halos. Or kung meron man, very minimal. Pero safety is an issue.
Can I have a follow-up question, ma'am?
Sure.
How about Palawan? Is it okay to put it there? Because I think there's no fault there.
Okay, you think of Palawan as a safe place or probably an alternative for the site of a nuclear plant. But there is no, to me, to us, there are no safe places for any nuclear plant. Because if you remember, the first nuclear plant that would have been built in the Philippines would have been in Bataan. But a lot of studies had come up and it had all came out with a conclusion that it is never safe to do a nuclear plant in any area, especially near the sea. That is the main reason, like what Secretary Siring said, the main reason for our not espousing nuclear plant, despite its being a clean source of power in terms of greenhouse gases, we are not considering it at all because of the safety reasons. We just don't know what's going to happen should there be any leakage. And I don't think we can afford to have any adverse impacts on our marine life.
All right, thank you so much, Miss Lourdes Tibig. And for that question, University of the Philippines.
Jules, I have a question.
Dr. Rosa wants to add?
Okay, Dr. Rosa?
Another issue on the nuclear energy is the disposal of the nuclear waste. We have very few
Yes.
areas that can be, I mean, where the waste can be put in.
I think that's a problem of Japan, no? In Fukushima.
Ako as a geologist,
Round of applause. Ang gwapo ni Dr. C.P. David.
hindi na ako magsasalita. No, being a geologist, I personally don't have a stand yet on nuclear power just yet. But my point is that there are other sources of energy that we can tap. Before we look into nuclear, there is hydropower. We are blessed with many, many sources of hydropower. Geothermal is another one. And we haven't yet explored our potential for wind and solar just yet. So I would actually, and many other sources of electricity. And to me, we should exploit all other sources first before we look into a higher technology that we might not even be prepared for just yet.
Yes, Dr. Paraso.
Yeah, I'd just like to add on. You know that the radiation effects, I'm talking from the health perspective, they're very irreversible, effects on the human body. It's so hard for us to have radiation effects. And if it gets into the food, it gets into the web, no? The water, and it gets into the human system. It's so hard kasi genetic ang effects ng radiation.
Okay.
Thank you.
You are so lucky to be hearing from the best.
Yes, Secretary, we also have a question here from
Can we entertain one more? So,
a high school student
Oh,
po.
high school. Sige.
Hi, I'm Alison Pascual from Colegio San Agustin. I would like to ask, since we have identified the Philippines for having a high risk when it comes to global changes, what are the safest places to be in the Philippines, if you would suggest? For evacuation.
That is a very good question. It depends where you live, actually. It depends where you live. Our experts, can you please, maybe our geologist can take it off from there, and then the weather, and then the forester, and then health.
Well, unfortunately, in terms of typhoon occurrences, typhoon formation and typhoon occurrences, unfortunately, the Philippines is the country all over the globe that's most exposed to typhoons. But if we look at in terms of impacts, one of the rather projected impacts of climate change that is really going to be a threat, not just to most of our communities, is sea level rise. And I'm talking about coastal communities. No one is ever safe from sea level rise if it happens at the rate that we expect them to be. So if you look at where are the safest place in terms of impacts from accelerated sea level rise, I would say it would be in inland areas. But in terms of impacts on other sectors, well, we do have to look at that very carefully because there's hardly any area, whether in the developed world or in the developing world, that is perfectly safe from the impacts, whether actual or projected impacts, adverse impacts of climate change.
So what we're saying here is that we've seen naman how we've thrived as a community. We've seen how we've survived. We wanted to know how it can be survivable. If we are to be specific with Yolanda, most of those who were affected are actually coastal areas. And these are the areas where you now start to think, should we allow them to go back? Or if they should go back, what are the interventions in infrastructure that we think can protect them from all these hazards? At the same time, even if they insist to go back, knowing their vulnerability, because that's their choice, being a democratic country, at least when they are required to evacuate, they should listen. So this is just the whole point. If you're going to ask me, can we survive? Yes. Otherwise, I will resign because, I'll be so depressed the whole time. It really depends where you live. And we have now multi-hazard maps. And even, let's say, inland and upland, there's also issue of a landslide. I think a geologist, and rain-induced landslide